I have an old Iraqi bill with Saddam Hussein's face on it. It's worth about 17 cents according to Google. What is the most controversial thing you own? My grandfather went to the World Scout Jamboree in the Netherlands in 1937, and while he was there he traded patches and gear with some scouts from Germany. By 1937, the German Boy Scouts had transitioned into the Hitler Youth, so I own a Hitler Youth Boy Scout uniform with a bunch of swastikas on it. A complete ivory and ebony chessboard bought a sale of confiscated poacher stuff to fund elephant preservation. When I lived in Zambia and was on holiday in Kenya, my dad bought it, and I got it as a hand-me-down. We were friends with someone who owned an animal sanctuary, and their security had shot the poachers as far as I remember. They had a parentless baby hippo as well. It stole my sister's chewing gum and tried eating their cat. It was moved further away from the main houses after it tipped over their Land Cruiser. When I was 18, I bought a print of a 1918 German zoo advertisement from a thrift store. I thought the artwork was neat. It had a leopard on it, and I was completely cat-obsessed at the time. Turns out the artwork was by Ludwig Holbein. He would go on to produce Nazi propaganda. I wanted a chinchilla really badly as a kid, but my parents said hell no. One Christmas my grandma got me a teddy bear made out of chinchilla fur. Luckily my parents told me it didn't hurt the chinchilla, it's just like getting a haircut for them. But they were like WTH to my grandma. I now know better and am also like WTH grandma. My family owns a petrified walrus penis. My grandmother took it to get it identified at the Smithsonian several decades ago. Apparently her grandfather, or maybe it was her great-grandfather, brought it home after he spent several years on some type of expedition up around northern Alaska and points north. It has been loaned out to several museums at different times. The family has talked about selling it, but everyone has to agree, and so far there is no agreement about selling it. So I own 1/67th of a petrified walrus penis. I have a set of small bone-carved snuff bottles from China, dated to the 19C, with explicit images on them. They're kind of curiosities in themselves, but when my in-laws separated, my MIL called my husband and asked him if there was anything in the house that he wanted, and he said, "Nothing but the explicit snuff bottles." She took them and left them with a note that said, "I've left you. Please don't contact me again." I'd taken the snuff bottles. They were the only things in the house I liked. After their separation, we got all sorts of controversial hoardings, including a suitcase full of ivory and an abundant collection of Enid Blyton's first edition books. A first print edition of Batman Damned #1, the one featuring Batman's Little Batman. From DC Black Label, featuring more adult content. Violence and swearing are totally fine, but a shadowy penis profile made people flip out enough they removed it from subsequent print runs. I don't think I have it anymore, but back when I was in 9th grade and my brother was a senior, we hosted a foreign exchange student from Norway. Without us knowing, he had been taking pictures of every overweight/obese American that he saw while he was here for the year. It wasn't until a year after he went home, on Christmas, he sent us a leather-bound photo album. Like, it looked really nice. Opened it and boom. Hundreds of photos of people from Walmart and malls. My mom was not too impressed, but me and my brother had a good chuckle. Not even at the people, but just the fact that he took all that time and energy to collect all those photos and then make them into a photo album. I have my grandfather's Hitler Youth knife. He was 12 when the war ended, but he spent the last year or so of the war on a U-boat, basically as an assistant. Edit. This comment blew up, and I wanted to give some background. My grandfather was taken to a camp after the war ended for re-education and denazification. He was shown films of the concentration camps and other atrocities and quickly denounced Nazism. He met my grandmother in Germany, and they immigrated to the U.S. in the 1950s and raised a family. Once I reached adulthood, I became kind of a history buff and began asking him about his experiences. He told me some stories and gave me the knife. I keep it now as a historical artifact that I have a direction to. How many people can say that? And as a reminder that good people can be made to do horrible things. He understood all too well that he was a victim on the Nazis, and that he should do all he could to stop and prevent racism and authoritarianism in all its forms. Thank you all for the kind comments, and not just jumping on me for admitting I have Nazi paraphernalia. A piece of irradiation board drill encased in resin. It has a cloud floating above it in the resinware. The focal point is, it's safe now, bizarre to think about, and probably illegal as F for a civilian to acquire today. A collector's edition pre-order of Duke Nukem Forever, no longer mint condition because I played it. Duke Nukem Forever will forever hold a very dark scar in my heart. Growing up, my childhood sucked. Sheltered, emotionally abused, etc. But one shining light was playing DN 3D Overland with my brother and stepdad on 3 computers we had in the basement. For years we did this. One day, when I was maybe 13, my stepdad took me into his office on a bring your kids to work thing, and he let me get a magazine that was a major reveal issue for the Duke Nukem Forever announcement. I was floored. It felt like it came out of nowhere. I still have this magazine today. Ended up joining the 3D Realms forum, becoming one of the top posting members, joined an IRC chat with a dozen or so other members, and did this for years. Even met up with some users over the years. At some point it stopped being about the game and was just a community I was in and loved. Years passed and I grew up. Finished high school, went to college, got married, bought a house, had kids. At some point I stopped being part of that community, but kept waiting for DNF as this thing I'd check in on once or twice a year. It finally gets released when I'm 28 years old, and it obviously was what it was. Not even a half-finished game that wouldn't have been even remotely good if it was released 10 years earlier. I went from 13 to 28 in the time that game was being made, and it ended up being the biggest letdown I could have possibly imagined. At least I enjoyed the journey. Radiolab did a show a few months back about good luck flags. I might be misremembering the name, but they were essentially Japanese flags that families, co-workers, and towns would write messages of good luck on and send to the front with their loved ones. They were super common and often picked up as souvenirs by Americans. There's a group working on returning them to Japan and the families of the deceased. Most WW2 vets and their immediate families seem to be or have been uncomfortable with the idea of returning them because they have some leftover animosity towards the Japanese or, more commonly, some guilt and PTSD surrounding having survived a brutal war and having evidence of those who didn't in your home. The episode also interviewed a woman whose father's good luck flag had been returned to her, and she didn't hold any anger towards the man who had taken it or his family. She was happy to have a tangible connection to her father and grateful to have received it. It's a very personal choice that can have some tough implications about your granddad and war in general. You have no obligation to return it. That said, I think it would be fascinating and good to find a way to get it back to the loved ones of the person who wrote the journal. It could certainly be a powerful experience for you, not to mention a pretty amazing story. A Nazi SS officer's dagger and Hitler's youth ceremony bayonet. A friend gave them to me days before he died of cancer. They belonged to his dad. Edit. My friend couldn't speak too well by the time he gave me these. I don't necessarily know why he decided to pick me. I have been trying to decide what to do with them. Donating is an option I have considered. In our many conversations, he had mentioned Ukraine and Yugoslavia at times as having been places his parents traveled through. Having met his dad once, very briefly, before he died in 2005, I can honestly say it wouldn't come as any sort of shock to me to find out he was a Nazi. He seemed pretty grisly and stern. I just never considered the idea until the knives were given to me 4 years ago. Paulo had no other family that he knew of left by the time he passed. He never cared to try to find any either. If I had to guess why he married a Paul and waited to move was maybe she was a sympathizer and to avoid the rush to America. He would have been too old to be Hitler Youth.